ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the premiere of our new show, Senior Prom. I'm your host, Stanley Dyrector. Before I introduce our illustrious guest, award-winning former crime reporter for the New York Daily News, Theo Wilson, I'd like to tell you something about us. The senior part of our title stands for mature. Bear with me, I'm still trying to live through my second childhood. Now, the second word of our title, the prom part, stands for, naturally, you guessed it, fun, which I hope we have a lot of. So enough with our title. Now, as for our modus operandi and the ideas for our show, people. They are our show's mainstay and life's blood, the palette in which they will paint their many colors onto our growing canvas of life's drama. In some of our shows, some of our topics will be eclectic, in that they will include a bit of poetry here and a bit of philosophy there, a painting to look at, or a piece of music to listen to, and other surprises. I may do handstands. Kidding, but not to despair. We will mainly be doing interviews with interesting guests who will be from all walks of life. We aspire to learn from them, perhaps be amused, be touched, live vicariously through their experiences, their work, all those goodies. Hopefully they will share with us what their years have taught them, how they made it, how they get through the highs and the lows, the hard knocks, and has the world changed for them? Have they had a change of heart about life and its meaning? Do they think there is a hope for the future of society, or will it still be business as usual, sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Just kidding, folks. Or are our guests just content to be part of the status quo? Now, I cannot say just a few words about our guest, Theo Wilson, because it won't fill the bill. Theo's career is continuous. I'd need reams of paper, so here's the closest I can come to a thumbnail sketch. She began working in a newspaper city room as a writer-reporter the day after she graduated college with a Phi Beta Kappa key and an A major in English at the tender age of 20. She worked and learned her craft on various newspaper staffs, including the Richmond News Leader, the Evansville, Indiana Press, and the Indianapolis Times, the Associated Press, and the Philadelphia Bulletin. Among other things in her over 3 decades-long newspaper career was Theo's specialty in covering front-page news and national trials for the New York Daily News. She reported on the trials of Dr. Sam Shepard, Jack Ruby, Angela Davis, the Boston Strangler, Charles Manson, Patricia Hearst, Sirhan Sirhan, Candace Mosler, Claudine Lange, Roman Polanski, the Summer Sam, Klaus von Bülow, John DeLorean, Gene Harris, and more. Theo, I'm sorry for the omissions. Please add to it. But first, why a reporter? Particularly, why a crime reporter? It's obviously guts and gory. When you were a kid, did your parents try to steer you in another direction, like perhaps something more acceptable for young ladies? You know, a nurse or a public school teacher. Obviously, a public school teacher that was not karate trained, since that's what you have to be today. Could you answer those questions?
Well, no, my mother and father didn't try to direct me anywhere. I was one of 11 children. They had enough other things to do than steer us. And also, I was one of the youngest of this huge crew in New York. And I was a writer. I was born writing, and I wrote all the time, and I wrote poetry and short stories, and I was published when I was 8 years old. By the time when I got out of college, the first job I was offered was on a newspaper, and I took it. And it just was wonderful, because there I was getting paid to write, which I love to do. And I worked for a small newspaper which didn't have the luxury of being a copy boy, so I was thrown right into it. You know, the city editor ran copy, and I wrote and reported from the day I became a reporter.
But wasn't it tough being a girl?
Not for me, it wasn't.
Well, I mean, didn't...
No. They really, yeah, it was a man's world. It was really a man's world. And I'd go through little things with guys, you know, every so often when I get into a new newspaper, they would try to...
Put the make on you?
Well, that was only part of it. What they really wanted to see was, could I really do it? And once I did it, I was accepted immediately. Newspaper men are the greatest friends in the world. They're the best. They have no jealousy. They love, at least I'm talking about the newspaper days when they weren't suffering from a terminal case of pretension.
Pretension. I think that's what we have a lot of today, but that's another point.
Well, these were the old days when newspaper men made little money, had no job security, and they stayed in the business because they loved it. They really loved it. They could have made money doing a lot of other things, but they loved the newspaper business. And it was a rather wild time. We were all pretty goofy, really goofy. But we were also very talented.
You were like free spirits, you'd say?
I would say we were free spirits.
Yeah, that's, I know you've worked on so many, well, it's hard work, right?
Hard work,
Well,
I mean. about getting to crime, well, I didn't choose it. By the time I got to New York, I had done all kinds of writing and reporting, and I'd covered trials, and I don't know how somebody decided to send me out on the Dr. Sam Shepard, the first trial.
Oh, that's, the first trial. That's before F. Lee Bailey, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a whole bunch of us went out from New York, Dorothy Kilgallen and Bob Considine and Pat Moore from the AP. He was their big Pulitzer Prize winner, and it was a big crowd. I was like the new kid on the block.
New kid on the block with those overpowering personalities?
But, obviously I did okay because the news loved what I was doing. I wrote very fast. I was very good in the courtroom. I had this thing about taking down, my notebook looked like a transcript, actually.
Really?
Yeah. I had a real good ear, too. And I could also tell when a lawyer was moving in for a kill. You have to have an ear. Because otherwise you're taking down a lot of no. But all of a sudden, there's something happens to a lawyer's voice, and he starts to ask, and that's when I start taking everything QA, because he's going to do something.
He's going to throw the whammer.
I mean, you don't forget, we had no tape recorders. They were not permitted in court. What I went into what I went to a courtroom with was a notebook and a pen, and that was it. There were no cameras, tape recorders. As a result, TV and radio were kind of out of it. This was the last great newspaper story because you opened up the New York Daily News, which was the premier trial paper of the country. And we were the ones they set the standard by. They would open up the whole newspaper for me. So I would have every single thing that happened in court that day you could read in the New York Daily News.
Yeah, also you could see pictures. That's what I liked about the Daily News. I guess
but there were no pictures in the courtroom. But they took lots of pictures outside the courtroom. I traveled with photographers and an artist.
Ah, so the artist would...
in the courtroom, yeah.
And the photographer would wait?
Yeah, well, outside you want to get witnesses coming in and out of the courtroom, lawyers coming in and out of the courtroom.
Right.
But they were really forbidden in the courtroom. And of course, today with tape recorders, they should get every word.
Today, I mean, it's open school week. Everything is there. You can see everything. No holds barred, da-da-da-da. But, I mean, you've covered so many trials. It's unbelievable. All these murder trials, God, I remember reading in your bio that you covered the Boston Strangler, you covered Son of Sam, Charlie Manson.
Those are the good guys.
Oh.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Who were the bad guys?
The pretty bad ones, the pretty good ones, yeah.
Well, I mean, were these all, it slips my mind. All of these guys, they didn't get hanged? I mean, they kind of walked.
Klaus von Bülow was acquitted once and convicted. Convicted once and acquitted the second time. Sam Shepard was convicted the first time, acquitted the second time.
Right. F. Lee Bailey was his attorney on the appeal.
Well, he got him out, and then he did the second trial. Yeah.
Klaus always appeared to me. They did the movies on him and all this. Klaus von Bülow always appeared to be like a cold fish, wasn't he?
He was a very forbidding-looking man. He really was. There was something very chilling about him.
Really?
Very chilling. He was more chilling to me than Charlie Manson.
Is that right?
Yeah, really. Charlie Manson was a big myth. I mean, Charlie Manson was this little runt. He was my size. And he had this big myth about him. And of course, the murders he did were so heinous and so horrible and so frightening. But, he was a teeny little guy. I mean, at one point, I covered Charlie Manson for 10 months, and that's a long time to be sitting in a courtroom. But there was a recess. The judge was off the bench. The jury was out of the room. I was sitting in the front row with 3 other women reporters. Just happened to be 4 women reporters sitting there talking. We'd been there. When Charlie was sitting at the defense table, all of a sudden he turned around and he said something about, "Your karma is coming down on you." And without anything, I said, "Oh, shut up, Charlie." And I thought, oh my God, I want to turn. Shouldn't yell at a defendant. But like that, we were all crazy.
Wait, that was the trial. Wasn't that the trial where he talked about witchcraft and all that? Wasn't there a witch or something, or some kind of?
No, he didn't talk about it. This was a trial filled with spectators who were druggies and were having, flashbacks, and we had the girls from the Charlie Manson trial was sitting outside with their shaven heads holding this vigil. It was really a crazy trial, just crazy people. And in the courtroom were several strange spectators. At one point, one of the artists, something happened to her. I think she was, I don't know what happened to her. She's one of the good artists. She came walking into the courtroom in the middle of the session, carrying a Bible and saying, "I am the whore of Babylon. I am here to save my brother." So she gets down to the well of the courtroom, and the judge yells, "Take her out and hold her for contempt." So they schlep her out because, you have to hold her until the session's over, so they're going to hold her for contempt.
Right.
Meanwhile, we have to get, because we're going to now be going into a contempt hearing, we have to find out something more about her.
Right.
So we're waiting for one of the deputies to come back, and one of them came back, and he sat down next to us, and one of us whispered to him, what about this woman? Who is she, do you know? He says with a perfectly straight face, "I don't know, we ran a check on the Babylon PD, and they don't have a thing on her."
Wasn't it? But there was also a lady that used to go to court.
Julie Shapiro, beautiful Julie Shapiro. She also was being held in contempt of court because she yelled at the prosecutor she called him a liar. Earlier at the trial, Julie came in wearing no brassiere, and the judge ordered if you're going to come to court, you have to wear a brassiere. So she did, and when she yelled at the prosecutor and they started to drag her out of the courtroom, she said to all the reporter friends, "Why are they taking me out of here? I'm wearing my brassiere." So when they took her out for a contempt hearing, that's when we found out more about Julie, which was that she came from Chicago and she was studying to be a witch under Morlock the Warlock, who was in the yellow pages of the LA phone book. Really, honestly.
That is bizarre.
So, this is a trial that was filled with little goodies like that, yeah.
Well, I want to show a headline, a particular newspaper headline to our wonderful audience out here. I hope they can see it. And can you elaborate on this a little?
What, are you holding up Patty Hearst?
Yeah, Patty Hearst, right.
This is one, okay. Well, that particular one was a technical problem with, she lost a fight over introducing very important evidence, the evidence, in fact, that convicted her. And Patty Hearst was another of those really strange trials where we had very interesting things happen, including the heiress herself taking the stand and taking the Fifth Amendment, something like,
wow.
I think it's a big headline, used to be a headline. I think she took the Fifth Amendment about 42 times.
Oh, God. Well, her parents were there, right? Randolph Hearst?
Sat there every day.
I got to tell you a Randolph Hearst story.
Okay.
One day I met him in Beverly Hills. What I was doing there, I don't know. I don't remember. All I know is I had this little conversation with him where he told me that his newspaper was covering the Senate investigation on the criminals in New York City. I guess it was the Kefauver Committee. And they were kind of bum-rapping Frank Costello, the noted hood. And so anyway, Randolph Hearst came home one night, and at his doorstep he saw a case of champagne, and he opened up this note that was inside, and it says, "Drink it well, your friend Frank Costello." And Mr. Hearst got like crazy in the head. He looked around, wanted to know if the FBI was watching him. He was afraid to go to the phone. He was afraid to return the champagne. Obviously, he was in his house, and so the only thing he could do was he drank it.
I hope.
Yeah,
Costello was very famous for that. He sent flowers to a lot of reporters, women reporters. He had a great greenhouse. He was a real gentleman.
Really?
I never ran into him. He wasn't on my table.
He never sent you a case of champagne?
Let me tell you about Randolph Hearst. He was a real gentleman. His wife hated the press so much once Patty became a bank robber, defendant. She'd walk past her own reporter, from the San Francisco Examiner, and say, "You ghoul, why are you standing here?" She was really something. But Randolph was wonderful, very, very, very courtly, very nice. At one time during the trial, they blew up part of Hearst Castle. The underground was really busy up there. They blew up part of the castle. And an artist friend of mine, her seat was right next to the parents. See, I sat up in the jury box. The jury was here. Some of the press was here. Patty was, here, and the parents were there. And the artist said to me, As she walked in, Randolph Hearst stood up to allow her to pass, but it was so gentlemanly. And she, for some reason, she didn't know what to say. She finally said to him, "I'm terribly sorry to hear about your castle, Mr. Hearst." And he said, "Oh, that's all right." And she thought, what a dumb thing to say. But what do you say to a guy whose castle was blown up? You know?
What do you say?
It's like cards even, like, sorry about your castle.
Uh-huh.
But he was always very nice. And Patty Hearst was she was a very interesting woman when she became a convert named Tanya, and she became kind of a bore as a Hillsborough debutante on trial. But she had a very interesting...
I want to show our audience another headline.
Okay.
A very interesting headline, because this is probably one of the most famous headlines in the world of headlines. Can you, when we get a picture of this, there it is, can you kind of tell us who this is?
That's Jack Ruby. And Jack Ruby, as everybody must remember, killed Harvey Oswald on television the day or two after Oswald was arrested for the murder of our president, before he could be charged even. And Jack Ruby, this was in Dallas, this is where I covered this trial. Jack Ruby's lawyer at that time was Melvin Belli from San Francisco, very famous California lawyer. A lot of criminal lawyers didn't think Mel Belli should have handled this case, but Mel Belli had one great point. He kept saying over and over that they should have a change of venue. And they kept saying, what's the difference? The whole world has seen him shoot. They saw him on television. If you didn't see him the first time, you saw him on the replays.
Right.
Why move him out of Dallas? And Melvin Belli said, because in Dallas, they've got a real feeling about this. They are furious.
Sure.
They want somebody to pay for the fact that Dallas got this big blot on its name, that this great president was killed there.
Right.
They didn't give him a change of venue. Of course, he was found guilty. And then on an appeal, the appellate court ruled that he should be given a second trial, and they wrote in the appellate decision, anywhere in Texas, but not in Dallas. So Mel Belli was right. Unfortunately, poor Jack died of cancer in prison before they ever had a second trial. But people said, like they say now about O.J. Simpson, how can you get a jury? Everybody knows about O.J. Simpson. Well, how did they get a jury for Jack Ruby? Everybody had seen this on television. Everybody was watching television then anyway, because the president had just been murdered.
Right. Yeah.
They had been, you're glued to the television. Then they see Oswald being brought in. They see Jack Ruby go over to him and shoot him, kill him.
Yeah, sure.
And then, you see in the president's funeral. I mean, it was like, who didn't see this?
It was a trauma. I remember seeing that on TV.
This stuff about can you get a jury? I'll tell you, you can't get a jury anytime, anywhere that doesn't know something about a big case. I've only covered high-profile trials. That's all I've covered. I haven't ever covered small ones. So every trial I've ever gone to has had enormous publicity, enormous. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. That's what I'm covering.
Right.
And the question always comes up is how are you going to get a fair jury? And the way you get a fair jury is you have to say to them, do you know who Jack Ruby is? Yes. Do you know that he shot Oswald? Yes. Can you put aside anything you read, thought, or heard about until you hear evidence from the witness stand? And if you can really truthfully say, I'll hold it all in abeyance, I'll forget it, then you can be a juror, and they're going to do the same thing with O.J. Simpson. They're not going to move it out of L.A. Where'd they move it to?
But how many people can you find that can really answer those questions? I mean, I
think a lot of people.
Yeah,
I'm open-minded on it.
You think maybe people are underestimating?
As a reporter, I always kept an open mind because I wanted to listen to what was going on in the trial room. If you come into a courtroom biased, as unfortunately I'm reading reporters now who are already so biased that I can't believe those.
In the O.J. Simpson case,
in a lot of others.
A lot of cases, huh? Okay.
If you walk into a trial room and you don't listen with an open mind, you're not going to hear a whole lot. It's amazing. I mean, you have to hear what the witness is saying, and you have to hear what the lawyer is trying to say, and you have to listen. And if you've already decided that somebody's guilty, you shouldn't be in the courtroom, number one, as a reporter. Now, as a reporter, I was able to do that. And the trial reporters I ran around with, and who were the top trial reporters of the country, we flew around all the time together, always. We'd call each other and say, you're going to so-and-so? Yeah, stay at the so-and-so hotel and get me a room near you. And we'd be
You mean you didn't have to pay for your own flying and travel expenses? You as a...
For what? That's my business, my job.
In other words, like the Daily News paid for all of that stuff.
Of course.
Well, I mean, hey, I'm a layman. What do I know? Hey.
Not only that, but we flew first class because that's how the news operated. It was the biggest paper in the country, one of the fancy ones, and it was the New York City newspaper. Mm-hmm. The New York Times had a little circulation, but it was very famous, and it was covered Calcutta. Mm-hmm. We used to say, the Times covers Calcutta, we'll cover the Bronx, and we know where we are at.
I love it.
So anyway, this was what I'm saying is that you can get a jury. The trouble with this particular case is now jurors, because money is flying around, you're going to have to be very careful. What if a juror becomes a juror because they want to make money?
That's terrible.
Would that not be a horror? Isn't that awful?
It's possible, isn't it? Huh?
And there ought to be, I'm afraid, I hate more laws because there are plenty of laws governing the courts now, but I truly think there's going to have to be a time when maybe by law a juror cannot profit from a case. How would you like to be the juror who can sell for several $1 million your story because I was the juror who didn't convict? How would you like that?
I don't think I personally could live with myself on that kind of situation.
Well, but say there's a juror who wants to make money.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'm Lily White.
This is an added problem, you see, that we have never had before.
Yeah.
Witnesses weren't paid. You didn't bother witnesses. When I covered stories, I wouldn't go near a witness. I wouldn't go near a witness. And when you go near a jury, you just didn't. You just didn't.
Well, explain this differentiation to me then, please. You were called the tabloid queen.
Oh, the Daily News was tabloid size. Uh-huh. And when they wrote a big story about me at New West magazine about all the trials I had been covering, I was going into the Roman Polanski rape case at that time.
Yeah.
I came out here. One of the writers came out to interview me, and I've had a lot of stories written about me, but this one was in the New West, and they thought it was a great title, the tabloid queen of the trials. That was just because of the size of the tabloid.
Right.
Tabloid journalism is a whole different thing. I mean, I was not a tabloid journalist. The tabloids were talking about the National Enquirer and so forth. And they are, they're out of control. They really are.
Would you ever, don't hit me, but would you ever have paid anybody for information?
Never, never, and never. And in fact, after the Dr. Capolino trial, the most important witness of all, the mystery witness, the woman who saw him kill her husband and who got the authorities to arrest him for killing his wife, she came to the Daily News and said, I'm going to give Theo Wilson a story. But only after both trials were over. And everybody wanted her, but nobody. At that time, I'll tell you, I don't know whether Marge Farber, who was the great witness, I don't know whether she would have been able to withstand what happens today, because she was broke. We never gave her a dime, because that's not the way we work. But I'm thinking if it were today, and somebody offered her, $2-3 million, which they do all the time, whether she would have told her story during the trial. See, she never opened her mouth, except on the witness stand, until after both trials were over. And then I went down to where she lived in Sarasota, Florida, spent a week with her and for the news, had a big 3-part series on everything she'd lived through during these 2 terrible trials she'd been through. And she never got a dime.
Well,
that was her decision. But I think these days it'd be different. I really do.
Well, what about these days? What about somebody like Candace Mosler? Candace Mosler, I think we might have a photograph of Candace Mosler. If we could bring it up, and then we could see a picture of Theo and Candace. There it is. And Theo.
Candy's on my right, and I'm on the left. That was a huge poster that the news put on every news truck and in all the subways at the time that I was covering her down in Miami. Candace was a Southern beauty,
a belle?
Well, sort of.
Yeah.
She was a little 5'2", blue-eyed blonde lady with this IBM machine inside her.
Oh, really? An IBM machine, wow.
Very. She was accused with her nephew and lover, who was her lover, who was also 20 years younger than she, of killing her husband, who was a multimillionaire from Texas. We had the trial in Florida because they were wintering in Florida, and that's where he was found. And she was represented by Percy Foreman, the greatest lawyer in Texas. Percy was a true, great, incredible criminal lawyer, and he got them off.
Really? So,
he did what good lawyers, what they're going to do with this O.J. Simpson. He made the victim such a horror that you felt, he should have been dead. They're going to do the same thing with Nicole. Jack Mosler was painted by Percy Foreman as a man with such evil, and of course he never had to prove it. He just told the jurors this man was slaughtered because he was such a terrible man, and she didn't do it, and he didn't do it, but there were millions of people who would have loved to kill him. That's how you do it. With O.J. Simpson, I'll tell you right now, they're going to make Nicole as bad a lady as they can make. The defense will do that. And that's what happens, and it's not, she won't be the first one, and nor will she be the last. When Dr. Sam Shepard, he was accused of killing his wife, Marilyn, they had stories about poor Marilyn that were awful, and it's a terrible thing being murdered because you lose everything. It's just not your life. You lose your private life. You lose dignity.
Dignity and all of that is a terrible thing to lose. Dignity. If you're dead, though, I mean, it's your relatives and all that kind of stuff. But let me ask you, Theo, since we're really going through this time real fast, I got to ask you. Well, you have a book coming out soon, and it's called Hot Copy, and it's about your experiences in the newspaper business, which I'm sure all of us.
A lot of trials, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I didn't want to do and what I would never do was just rehash the trials, because everybody knows them. But what I wrote was really how you cope with covering a trial when you work as hard as we do. And the things that go on that you never put in the newspaper, you just wouldn't, because these days, I don't know, they put everything in the newspaper, but the way you survive, I'll tell you, I've covered everything. I've covered national conventions, I've covered hurricanes, I've covered earthquakes, I've covered everything. And the hardest job on a newspaper is to cover a trial properly. That means you sit in the courtroom, you never, ever, ever walk out of that courtroom unless the jury's gone. You're in there, you never walk out of the courtroom, ever.
Well, I have to ask you this before our time is up. What an aspiring newspaper reporter, what would you advise them? A lady, we'll say, some
reporter.
A lady, somebody who wants to be a reporter.
Read a lot, write a lot.
How do you get your break, your shot?
Well, this is something else, I mean, you're going to have to just pound a lot of doors. The best thing is to really learn on a small paper, where you get to do everything. The minute you get to a really large paper, you're specialized. But a young reporter on a small paper, they'll cover the 4-H club fair one day, they'll cover an obit the next day, they'll cover an interview with a starlet, maybe. Then they learn, you learn.
Theo, I guess our time is up. Let's keep talking now, because
Okay.
I love you.
This is fun.
This is really
Wish
fun.
you luck in this wonderful, wonderful show.
Thank you. I hope we can continue, and I'd like to have you back on our show if that's possible. May we all live and be well and be healthy, and well, that's the same thing as being well, being healthy. So what else can I say except I had 10 million questions to ask you, and all I wound up.
I'm glad we got to talk a little anyway.
A little bit, not much.
You
a
didn't
little
get
bit.
to say much, Stan.
Oh, I threw in my 2 cents,
Okay.
maybe 3 cents. Okay. But there are 10-cent words, as Ernest.